Good evening, and thanks again for another edition of Ideas Exchange. My name is Ahianyo. We'll come your way on Wednesdays, look at typical concerns affecting the average Ghanaian. And I'm sure you have been monitoring many things happening around. At least this week alone, about 4 or 5 controversial things are happening. The latest, I'm sure you know, is the Supreme Court ruling suggesting that the decision by the president to ask Daniel Domelevo to leave office was unconstitutional, illegal. The same Supreme Court today suggested in its ruling that the law that gives the president the power to impose restrictions on the movement of Ghanaians is also unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court has done 2 things today. Just yesterday, we were talking about a stolen ambulance or a missing ambulance or a relocated ambulance, which is part of the COVID-19 funds, and this one specifically was sponsored by the World Bank. And that one, again, as we know, also generated a lot of controversy because a certain company had put on its Facebook page that they were selling this particular ambulance in question. So some Ghanaians in Dubai went and took that video. So you see the pictures of the display of the ambulance on the Facebook page of that company. The National Ambulance Service has responded that it is not true, but many people are asking questions that why will the company involved put on its Facebook page that it was selling these ambulances? And of course, many people have referenced this to the Auditor General's report on the COVID-19 funds, which made specific reference to these ambulances sponsored by the World Bank, which were never delivered, but are supposed to be delivered as of March this year, and they are not in. That controversy is hanging. And then from these ambulances, we also know that only yesterday, as we were talking about ambulances, a leaked letter from the Electoral Commission suggested that they were carrying an explicit directive from the office of the president, because the letter was specific that upon the directives of the president, all commissioners at the region or perhaps at the district levels should send their CVs to the office of the president with immediate effect, because the letter was signed on May 29th. And as you see, as it is rolling on the screen, that on the letter was making specific. So it says this comes to inform you that, and it goes on and on. Second sentence talks, second line talks about Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, and it goes on and on. So the controversy around the EC is also hanging, because many are questioning the capacity of the president, regardless of the role the civil or the public service should play, to find himself directly involved in the CVs of appointees. We also know that just yesterday, the Clerk of Parliament issued a statement declaring the Asan North seat vacant. And I can tell you on authority that the Electoral Commission today, just about some 2 hours ago, has issued a statement that the by-election in the Asan North constituency will be held on June 27. But this evening, our conversation on Ideas Exchange will be on twofold. First, quick Zoom interview I had with the former Auditor General, Daniel Domelevo. In this conversation I had with him just some few minutes ago, because of the schedule he has today, a lot of media houses have started calling him, both local and international, interested in what he describes as a clear example or an exposure of the wanton abuse of the powers of the president and total disregard of the Constitution. He sounded very excited because he feels he is vindicated. So I'll just play back that brief conversation I had with Daniel Domelevo via Zoom. And when I come back, I will introduce my guest who will be with me in the studio tonight to talk about the IMF and the conditionalities, the mid-year budget review that is coming, and of course, what you need to know in those conditionalities and what government can do to release your plight as an average Ghanaian. But Daniel Domelevo will speak at this stage.
Well, I think it's a good decision which has come at long last. And there are several people who reach out to me to say is justice delayed, which is justice denied. But my response to them always is that I think the justices of the Supreme Court know better. So they know why this time and not earlier on. But let me say that from my point of view, it's better late than never. So from today going, I don't think that will be repeated on any constitutional body or any auditor general. That is my happiness. But I'm equally sad that the highest office of the land, which is the presidency, is at the forefront of not respecting the constitution of the country. I found it a bit disturbing. And even when I drew their attention, they told me that because I am not a lawyer, I don't appreciate the law. I am hoping that they will write to the Supreme Court to tell them that they have to go back for law classes, since they have upheld the position that I was pushing forward.
I remember that when you went to church to thank God for bringing you this far, some CSOs were with you. And later, I remember CDD Ghana, Dr. Asante, was suggesting that you could take an action against government for treating you unfairly.
The battle is for the Lord. The most important thing is that the Supreme Court has spoken and clarified what the situation is. And I'm happy they've done that because many Ghanaians thought that there were some things untoward that I had done, which is the reason why the presidency said I should take the lead. So now that I think I feel vindicated, I don't think I need any redress beyond that. Many people have suggested it, and I jokingly tell them that, look, why would I take redress so to get compensation from taxpayers who did nothing to me because of a president who doesn't pay tax? So I'm not interested in any further action.
Okay, Mr. Daniel Domelevo, what does this mean to you? You were bent on fighting or exposing corruption. At a point, it became obvious that the state was working against the effort you were putting in. Now we know the story. It will be in our history books. For you, the experience, the trauma you went through, and where you are now, what does it mean to you?
It really helps the independence of the Office of the Auditor General and any other constitutional body. Because if you remember my response to the Office of the Office of the President, I made it clear that I was performing my duties in preparing the audit report for the financial year which had just ended 2000 and I think 2009 or so, or 2000. I think it's 2009. And so stopping me and say go on a leave will mean that he has stopped or prevented me from doing my work. And under Article 187 Clause 7A, it says the Auditor General in the performance of his functions does not take directions or control from any person or institution. So I was thinking that that was interfering with the independence. So this decision, I think, is a very good one.
Are there lessons in here for Parliament as an institution to look at, to at least work on the excessive abuse of powers, especially if it has to do with the executive?
Well, I don't think Parliament has any role to play over here because the independence of the Auditor General is clearly stated in Article 187, Clause 7A. Some people mischievously say that independence is for audit service. But read it, you will see that it says the Auditor General in the performance of his functions, not audit service, not audit service board. But some people with mischief will say that it is not Auditor General, but audit service or the board. So I think the law is clear, and where it must be interpreted is where it has just come from. So in my candid opinion, I don't think the Parliament has any work to do. What is left is for the executive and all of us to respect the position of the law. Thank you.
Okay. So before you go, maybe this is the last question. Have you had a word with the CSOs, Imani Africa, CDD, Ghana, etc., ASEPA, and so on, who joined you?
Yes. To start with, I must say a very big thank you to them for not giving up. and for bringing up this action. I think 2 years was enough for them, since they have given up. You know, there were 2 cases, and one was withdrawn when I left office. But the CSOs didn't give up. My thumbs up for them. They have done very well, and I will pray them to continue defending public officers who would like to discharge their duties without fear and favor. Otherwise, corruption will consume all of us. Thank you very much to you and all the Ghanaians, the press, and everyone who had given his or her support during this period.
Daniel Domelevo, former Auditor General, we are so grateful for this opportunity. We pray that God will be with you in your endeavors.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful too.
Thank you. So we were just speaking to Daniel Domelevo, the former Auditor General who was chased out of office. You remember that in the heat of the conversation at the time, he insisted that he has every legitimate reason to stay in office and work in the interest of the country. And you recall that even when he had to proceed on a brief leave, before he came, his offices were locked, and that generated all kinds of conversations. You had members of parliament, people in government, apparatchiks of government who supported the cause of the president and made sure that they were going to kick him out of office. If you recall, Nana Asante Bedietu, the executive secretary to the president, issued a long statement trying to explain or justify the illegality that the president proudly embarked on. But 2 years on, the Supreme Court has ruled this will be a landmark case, that what the president did was unconstitutional. What it means to the image of the presidency, the image of all those who were party to this illegality will live with us for time to come. And you would recall that this particular ruling has also made a specific statement that the appointment of the current Auditor General is unconstitutional. He has been in office for almost 2 years. If it is unconstitutional, what happens to the salary that has been paid to him over the period? We'll leave it here. This is Ideas Exchange. I'm sure in subsequent conversations, we'll speak to this. We'll be back after this break. So that was the conversation I had with Daniel Domelevo just after the court ruled. Many media houses have been chasing him. We managed to get him, and that was his brief response. We'll be taking a short break, as I said in the interview. When I come back, my guest is here with me in the studio. He's an economic policy and financial analyst, Kosi Jokoto. I want to welcome him first, and then I'll take a break. Kosi, you are welcome.
Thank you.
Is it Kosi or Koshi?
Anyhow you want to pronounce it, depending on where.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
I am bored, but I like your head.
Thank you.
I think that's just for how I want to welcome you. We'll be taking a short break. When we come back, we are talking about the IMF conditionalities, the expectations ahead of the mid-year budget review, what it means for you, businesses, and of course, our survival as a people. Welcome back. This is Ideas Exchange. The second part of this conversation will solely look at the state of our economy, IMF bailout, it's in, lots of demands. Because just last week, I spoke to some contractors who have not been paid since 2017, who said they want some of the IMF money. The pensioner bond holders are also saying because government has defaulted several times, they also want the IMF money. A lot of stalled projects, construction on the roads, building projects, other major initiatives by government, people expect that because they were stalled because of government difficulty in raising funds from the investment community, or people were not too sure, they are expecting that those projects will be fixed. Again, we also know that some statutory expenses will be affected. That is what will be forming the basis of our conversation. And we have not had any other person than an economic policy and financial analyst. Let me give you a brief of his background. He's a seasoned financial services professional with over 22 years of experience working in the business communities, development with development partners, other international financial institutions, and foreign investors. He has extensive knowledge in enterprise development, fund management, and institutional development, knowledge in investment and macroeconomic policy analysis. Very instructive for this conversation. Treasury management, project management, and then driving organizational strategic direction, and then credit risk management. Notable among some of the programs he has been actively involved in are risk-based supervision courses, enterprise-wide risk management, banking and corporate treasury management, credit risk management and administration, as well as these are certificates or courses that he has read, and a certificate in post management. He has a master's degree in economic policy management from the University of Ghana, Legon. Aside all the other certificates or degrees he has, in fact, he had his first degree, bachelor's degree in economics. And proud to join in Waxton Advisors, Kosi held positions at the Provident Insurance Company, the Strategic African Securities Financing Group, SAS, Capital Bank, and the Securities and Exchange Commission of Ghana. So tonight, my guest is Kosi Jokoto. Welcome again to Ideas Exchange here on
Thank you, Eric. And,
first of all,
good to be here.
Thank you very much, and happy short notice, and I'm happy to have you with me in the studio. We've had all the conversations around our processes towards the march to the IMF. First tranche of the money is in, $600 million, and we understand the conditionalities will be biting. Initially, they didn't come out as we have seen now. But for you, as somebody with some interest in economics, or economic policy and financial analysis as your job, what are critical observations you made towards and as we speak now?
Okay, thank you, and good evening to our cherished viewers. Eric, it's going to be very difficult going forward, not because anybody wants it to be like this, but this is where we find ourselves as a result of the inept of our leaders and decision they have taken in the past and where it has led us. Anyway, why are we here? The fact is that from 2017, when this government assumed office, the IMF program was in place, which was started by the SWAL government. And so things were being managed the way it's supposed to until we exited the program in 2019. And whatever happened since from 2019 up to today is as a result of not properly managing this country, our finances, our economy, and how we should protect the citizenry. It never happened. But people went on into the market borrowing and delivering, expending money that does not belong to Ghana, belongs to other nations and bilateral partners, and on frivolous policies. And normally, if government expend money, especially when these monies are acquired externally, it's supposed to be a boost to the economy, to grow the economy and generate jobs.
So that is what people normally describe as put the money into investment.
Exactly. So when that is done, you call something capital formation. That is what propels the growth of the economy. So the economy is supposed to pay back these monies.
This conversation is supposed to educate us and, of course, to appreciate the reality on the ground.
On the ground.
When you talk about investing money or plowing monies borrowed into investment programs, what specific examples can you cite for those who may not appreciate it from the way the conversation is going?
Okay, Eric, there is something called borrowing for development. And the countries like Taiwan, Singapore, China, and the rest have gone through these processes. And there are data available supporting this. So Ghana is not the first country to have gone into the market to borrow money in order to develop the country or the economy. Countries have done it. The issue is, when you do that, for instance, Taiwan developed its economy through borrowing. In fact, there was a time in their life they borrowed more than 10% of GDP every year, which means they also went over more than 100% per annum in order to develop there, but they never went into debt crisis, resulting in economic crisis. So the fact is, there are productive sectors of the economy. So when external money comes into the economy, you put them into these productive sectors. You are supposed to grow and form capital that can work, grow the economy, generate revenue and development and employment. And that, as a result, you use that to pay back the money that belongs to other people.
Now, this particular government, for example, has spoken about one district, one factory, one village, one dam, year of roads. Many would assume that these are productive areas which may provide direct or indirect jobs, but may also have long-term benefit. Are we suggesting that those were just slogans and the money really didn't achieve the impact needed?
Economic policy, you can evaluate it. If you say you have done 1, 2, 3, what are the outcomes? And you use the outcome. Okay, first, once you have decided, I'm doing one district, one factory, I'm doing year of road, I'm doing so. Let's leave the sloganeering out of the equation. You can sloganeering, you can do it. That one is on its own. And whatever you want to generate, maybe interest of the populace and the rest, you will generate it. Okay, but it have a reverse effect. Now the citizens are asking, if you say, I have borrowed so much and I have decided to do this policy 1, 2, 3, what is the outcome over the past almost 7 years? Would you say the outcome is positive? If it is positive, we wouldn't be where we are
now. Okay, now let's walk into the conditionalities that some are not too sure of what they are reading out there. Okay. Because it took about a week after the money had hit our account that people got to know that if we default in loan payment, for example, China may have access to some of our revenues from the power sector, or have direct access to some of the revenues we'll be generating from other sources. Many people did not know that there are some conditionalities that will directly impact on you and I as ordinary Ghanaians, let alone businesses operating in the country. Can you help us appreciate the critical ones that people should take note of? Okay,
let's look at it holistically. Then maybe we can break it down into some sectors. The fact is that Ghana's economy is on its needs, and it's on its needs because the country has gone broke. There's no money. That is the first thing. The second thing is, now we need to do something in order to salvage the country. That is why we have decided to go to the IMF to bail us out of the mess we have found ourselves. Okay, so when we're going to the IMF, we are going for money, and the money we have to pay back.
So it's not free?
It is not free. Okay, so the idea is, okay, if you have borrowed from other people, and you are unable to pay, now you need money because you belong to this society called IMF. Okay, we are ready to give you. But before we will give you, these are the things we think if you do, you will be able to help yourself. One, pay people you were already owing. Two, and thirdly, then you can pay back my money that you are asking for now. If you agree, we will go through a process.
Okay.
So that is the maybe basic understanding of going to IMF. Okay, so IMF has given us something they call the prior actions. Okay, so for us to even start conversing or even discussing about the money, the 3 billion that Ghana wanted, I want you to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And when you do those things, it gives me some comfort that you are committed in lifting yourself out of the doldrum to where you want to be in the future. Okay. But in managing economy, if you are sliding down, first you have to stabilize and stop sliding down. So what we are doing right now is to stabilize through the IMF. And if you stop sliding down and you stabilize yourself, the next is to move from where you are or where you have slid to the bottom pit to start building yourself up to the growth that you want. Okay, so with this background, what we're going to have is the IMF has given us a condition that, okay, we want to help you. The help now is about stabilizing the whole economy. So one of the things that went against the economy was decision of the Bank of Ghana, excessive financing of the government expenditure, which is called monetary financing, or BOG financing. It is estimated that for the past 3 years, the Bank of Ghana has financed the central government in excess of 100 billion Ghana cedis. Okay, so this is printing money into the economy. What that does is it devalues the existing money in the economy. And the existing money in the economy is your salary, is somebody's business money. How does that happen? If they push that excessive money into the economy because they are funding the government expenditure, which already it is known all over the world that government expenditure is not optimal. So there's inefficiency in government expenditure. But this is money that is coming to dilute what is in your pocket. So if you were earning 10,000 cedis as your salary and you are living comfortably 3 years ago, as a result of the excessive money that BOG printed and pushed into the economy, your money value may not be, you cannot buy goods and services that were 10,000 anymore, but you'll be earning something in the region of about 5,000 or 4,000 because prices had gone so high and your salary remained
self-induced inflation.
Exactly.
Could it be the reason why inflation shot up to about 50-something%?
Exactly, 54.1%.
I see in some documents that I'm going through, including what you shared with me, Prior Action 4, sign a memorandum of understanding between Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana to eliminate monetary financing and central government. Now, when this is done, this policy direction, what are the likely impact, for example?
Exactly, as you have said. That is one of the solutions IMF want to do. In the absence of the IMF, BOG, all things being equal, because that is what they have done in the years, they would have continued doing this.
So that also means
it's a problem
why IMF had to second somebody
to the Bank of Ghana to monitor
that. Is it
that
an issue of lack of trust in this government?
Of course, if they understand and knew what they were supposed to do, we wouldn't be here. Because if first year government was having an issue and you decided to go beyond what you were supposed to do normally in terms of supporting government expenditure or financing government deficits, and you did it for first year, you can tell government that, listen, this thing is going to cause problem in the economy. So next year, I'm not going to do it. But BOG, any other time the government knocks at their door, they just go ahead and do it. So if not for the IMF, so IMF says, if you do not do this agreement, we are not ready to give you this money. So they have no option than to agree that they are not going to do it. And the IMF has sent a representative, and they are at the World Bank. One person is also at the Ministry of Finance to monitor the fiscal side of issues. So that is one of the conditions. Then we can also go to public expenditure. Okay, let's do borrowing. That has been one of our bane. Excessive borrowing. For the past, since the government assumed office, the government goes to the capital market almost about 2.5 billion to 3 billion every year to borrow and bring into the economy. Okay. The issue is there is a debt management system that if you understand, and given the size of your economy, you shouldn't go
that far.
Because the economy has not grown beyond maybe more than maybe 30 or 20, even 20%.
But that is understandable because, for example, one of the prior action or what people will classify as conditionalities talks about what many describe as flagship programs.
Yes.
But to be specific here, I see Get Fund, Road Fund, District Assemblies, Common Fund. They must have a proper reporting system. And of course, all these issues have to go under gift mix. Gift mix, for example, has been in the system. It may have been sidestepped. But many people would say that many of these are suggesting that some of these public institutions may be facing some difficulties.
The gift mix is supposed to help us manage our public finance properly, because it's a framework that monitors all the inflows and outflows and define positions of your expenditure. All right. Because of one reason or the other, this government, most of its projects, they have taken it out of the gift mix. That is why most of the data they turn out and produce and report to Parliament, normally or most often than not, it is different from what the IMF gets. All right? So one of the conditions is bring all these projects, because if you look critically at government expenditure over the period, most of the flagship programs are inefficiently implemented and not properly evaluated, especially when it comes to value for money. And the consequence is what we are having now.
So the process that has started,
yes,
what does it mean for many of such flagship projects that we have been told may undergo review?
In fact, we do not need the IMF to tell us this. People have called, experts have called and told government, listen, let's review most of these programs, because we have been in this since 2017. And there's a place for policy evaluation. You said, okay, I've done this 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Let me look at it. Let me see whether I can do adjustment here and there. Anytime these informations go to government, what do they say? It's not subject to review. It's as if they know everything. Meanwhile, the outcome you're having now shows that you do not understand exactly what you are doing. Because if you do, we shouldn't find, in fact, we have become an example, in fact, a bad example of bad economic policy management. And the only thing consistent about these government policies over the period is the inconsistency in each of government policy.
And what does this mean to me? Now, IMF is with us. Our economy will be under close observation, especially with reference to the policies we'll be guided to implement. But for me, as an ordinary person, I am biting the bullet.
Yep.
And we don't know what is at the end of the tunnel for us. And let me clarify a little more as far as the ordinary person's interest is concerned. Just before the IMF gave us some breathing space, we saw 3 new taxes that were going to be implemented. Okay. These taxes took effect on May 1st. We also know from the conditionalities we are reading, for example, that electricity tariffs will go up quarterly. Yeah. Fuel prices may not have the subsidy that government may be using to cushion us, even though we understand that deregulation policy may be effective. But some would say that we're paying COVID-19 levies because we took free electricity, free water, and therefore if IMF is going to push us to be paying every quarter, then why do we have to do COVID-19 levy, for example, to be double taxation or payment? That's how some people want to interpret it.
Yes, Eric, you are right. As it is, if there is no more COVID, as the president has said, that is no longer a public issue, then COVID-19 levy should be off. But that is not where we find ourselves. What we are going through right now is like a parent. Let me give an example for maybe a lot of the economics and stuff. Let's practicalize it. If you have a father at home and the father earns 1,000 cedis, but for the past 6 years, every other year, the father spends more than 1,000 cedis. Maybe he spends 1,500, spends 1,200, spends 1,300. What is happening is that this father and the family have been living beyond
their means.
Okay. So if you sum up living beyond your means, it's either he's borrowing money from bank, he's borrowing from friends, he's borrowing from relatives, or once in a while somebody will give you 1 cedi, take it for free. Okay. When you accumulate this over the years, it will get to a point that the father goes to then people where he has been borrowing the money. And the people say, I won't give you. Because the one you have taken, you haven't paid. Okay, so if the father comes home, what is he going to do? The father will say, okay, now if we don't adjust our lifestyle,
okay,
we are going to go into trouble because there's no food at home. But we need to live. So if he's been giving the kids 5 cedi, you say, okay, now I'll give you 2 cedi. That is what Ghana is going to go through now. And when we talk about the IMF conditionalities, structural adjustment, and everything, this is how it's going to look like. Because what the IMF is helping our government to do, which they should have known, we have accumulated debt for successive years. And now those debts, we say we can't pay, which is the loan we have taken. So the loans have gone through restructuring. Okay, instead of paying within 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, it has been extended to 15 years and the rest. So your income can still support what you are going through. Then now IMF is helping us to tell us that, okay, you have to realign your expenditure. So if you have been going to the movies every weekend, maybe you have to cancel completely, not going to the movie.
And that is where public interest comes in.
Okay.
There's been a widespread call on government to cut expenditure by looking inward.
Yes.
This has virtually not been done.
Okay.
And then IMF, which is supporting government, is creating this picture to me as if they are ready to support them to live large or enjoy what they are doing. But I and you or my poor mother somewhere are the ones who are going to tighten their belt to keep them sailing. Is that the picture they have painted?
Not really. Okay, yes or no. Yes, because they have not specifically required that, because they do not have the mandate to tell them that, listen, reduce your government and don't have 120 ministers. You don't need them. Because our neighbor, similar economy, Côte d'Ivoire, they have about 30-something ministers. We have 120. In fact, in the previous years, we had more than 120. Okay. But what they have done is to tell government that, listen, given the existing condition, you cannot increase your wage bill as it is. Okay. So that implies that, okay, you can keep it like this if you want to. But if you are reasonable, you can think about cutting it down, because they have tagged the revenue, the amount of money, wages that you can dish out, that it must reduce.
Now, the other aspect of this conversation has to do with public expectation as government puts its notes together to present the mid-year budget review. Now, this becomes very critical because the average person may want to see some policy announcements that may bring some relief to them.
Okay.
Businesses are supposed to generate revenue, apart from creating opportunities for the masses. And it is these same revenues that government will be looking at to help meet the projections that may have been set by the IMF to satisfy the next tranche that will be released. Now, as it is now, how should government be thinking, especially as they put together notes for the mid-year budget?
Okay. Basically, the mid-year budget must automatically anchor itself on the IMF project. Because the budget, as its nature currently, government intends to spend over 60 billion Ghana cedis deficit. And this is where you question whether people who were managing or are still managing this economy understand. You have built up excessive deficit over time to the extent that you are even unable to pay your debt. Then this year, when you read a budget, you said you want to spend in excess of over 60 billion.
That's more than what you spent
more than
the previous
what
year.
Exactly in excess. Then you question whether, like, people really understand how to manage economy that is going down and try to stabilize it and bring it up. So, by giving this IMF program, that is not going to happen. Because if there's not going to be anything like
so
deficit
it means
running.
to me that if some promises were made to initiate some projects in my community,
it's not going to happen.
It won't happen.
It's not going to happen.
What happens to the stalled projects, for example?
The stalled project will suffer, and it has consequences in the future. But it is like chicken and egg situation, because do you commit yourself to all these projects that you want to do today, and when you do not have money? Or say, okay, I can't do it. Let me stabilize this economy. Because if we want to go the way we had started, the economy will crash. Because there is not even money to do it. Where are you going to get the money from? So, in all this, the fact is that Ghanaians and individuals and businesses are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this. Because government is not a caricature sitting somewhere.
So when you sit back and you listen to, let's say, pensioner bondholders, for example, who have severally said that IMF money is in. And so if government cannot raise money to honor its obligation, i.e. matured bonds that must be paid, or you have the Association of Road Contractors, for example, who say that government owes them billions of cedis, and therefore government can set aside a certain portion of this 600 million to cater for them. You see an end in sight from this request they make?
From my perspective, I think government has been very insensitive when it comes to the personal bondholders and other commitments that the government have, because you have budgeted this year to pay in excess of 30 billion when it comes to debts,
compensations and so on.
Debt, like paying back our debts.
Just that.
Just that. From January to now, you have not been paying. So, where are those monies?
Could it also be possible that the money is actually not coming?
Not coming, no, there is budget. Ghanaians are paying taxes taxes have gone up. So, where are they using those monies from? In fact, at least for, I've just, the final figure had just escaped me, but it's a lot of money for debt payment for this year. And first quarter is gone. We are almost in the second quarter. So, if government says it doesn't have money to even pay the individual bondholders, I find it very surprising, because there should be money available. The fact is that the IMF money is not for paying debt.
Is it that
it is not for paying debt?
Is it that the GRA, for example, will come to the IMF money not for paying debt, but is it that the GRA, for example, is underreporting or creating false hope about meeting revenue targets? Because this year, at least, we have witnessed for the first time that GRA had to go and sit on the necks of businesses to monitor how much revenue is coming in. ECG, for the first time in the history of our country, has to go on the field and mobilize revenue, even from government agents. So it looks as if there is desperation to look for money wherever it is to be able to plug the loopholes.
Eric, where we find ourselves, Ghanaians, as I've said, Ghanaians are the ones who are going to pay for this, because it's unfortunate, because this the inefficient expenditure did not go to, or was not evenly spread to Ghanaians. These are monies that has gone to individuals' pockets, but the general public are going to pay for it. Government is in debt; they can't pay. They need to increase their revenue. That is why the those are some of the prior actions. The first three, the income tax,
the taxes that
were introduced are part of the situation. So, business, we are in where we call the contractionary time of the economy. Businesses are going to slow down. Cost of living will go high, and the standard of living will be worse. That is the brunt we have to face.
This summary ties in with what may be the conditions we have to meet in order to access the subsequent tranches of the IMF money. We need to meet revenue targets, and if businesses will constrict, for example, it would also suggest that what government may be projecting will not it will not get it. Now, I'm raising this question, for example, because GUTA, Federation of Labour, TUC, name them, all of them have said that the three taxes which were recently introduced were unfriendly, unpopular, will kill government rather than helping government. And so they expect that this mid-year budget will make some reviews on some of these. Will it happen?
I do not think it's going to happen. And it's not going to happen because government has to meet its revenue targets. And meeting revenue targets is going to be difficult because the economy is not growing. If the economy is growing, then even with the same rate of tax, you can get more. The economy is rather plummeting. And when the economy plummets, all things being equal, you get less taxes. So that is why they have to introduce a new string or new tax handles.
Would you expect or be surprised if some additional taxes are announced?
I won't. In fact, the only concession in the IMF program that can help citizens are the LEAP and the rest that are supposed to be doubled and also indexed against inflation, so that the poor of the poor do not suffer so much, which is already happening. In fact, more people have been made poor as a result of government inability to manage the economy well as we speak. In fact, the average Ghanaian, if you do analysis on the average income of the Ghanaian right now, we are worse off. Businesses are worse off. So government thinking that I'm going to press more, you know, it's like Dr. Baumia have said it before. And I do not know why he's not talking around this time. Because he mentioned that you cannot tax yourself to success. Because you task, the businesses will suffer. And it becomes a cyclical issue.
Now, I've seen, because I've been going through some of the work you have done, and this one talks about unraveling IMF performance criteria, understanding the economic targets and guidelines. Yeah. Now, in view of what you have done, the conditions that have been set, the policies that have been announced now, and what you see as the expectation from both sides, you think we are on a good path towards meeting some of those targets?
Yes, given the condition. The government they do not have
any alternative.
They must, and it's a necessary condition. They must go through it. My fear is whether they have the heart to subject themselves through this thing.
Should the IMF delay the second tranche? What does it mean?
Well, the economy will start crumbling again. Because, in fact, if you look at the processes where we have to go through for the IMF bailout, IMF was practically helping Ghana in order to go through this program. It's like they were even ready before we went because they can see it.
Yeah, they kept telling us that
they were even
come and
talking
knock
to
at our doors.
Exactly, they were talking to our bilateral partners.
Yes,
please come help Ghana.
Yes, but help Ghana comes with a big hammer waiting to strike. For example, the IMF had to speak to the Paris Club. Yeah. And the Paris Club gave in because with America and all those
everybody calling
on them had to. But it's scary that if you are not able to pay back your loans, China, for example, and we know the story of China taking over the economies of other African countries having total access to revenues from our power sector, or IMF having access to other revenues. Now, sorry, I'm talking about China. Now, if this should happen, then we are dead. It's like we've sold our country to these so-called people who have helped us, but they are rather targeting what is ours.
You are not wrong. In fact, we have sold the country already because all the loans that were taken from China are collateralized, all right, using our revenues from power, revenue from the GET fund, revenue from our minerals, resources, and the rest. And China has a commercial mind when it comes to giving loans, especially the developing countries, because they have geopolitical interests. And what the colonial masters and the Europeans and the other people have done in the past, and they are controlling most of our resources. It's the same strategies China is also adopting to dealing with African countries. And you cannot blame them. The issue is our leaders being in a position to take this money, use them wisely, and generate and build their economy and pay back, because it's happened in the past. Why are we not able to do that? The fact is that our current leadership, especially when it comes to our economy management, needs a lot to be desired.
IMF may be the headmaster with the cane ready to whip us or punish us by depriving us of what will help us survive. Now, the president recently, and not once, not twice, and from other related people in government, are suggesting that with IMF in, the confidence in the investment sector or in the business sector may turn around, and therefore we may be able to go back to the capital market. Yeah. For example, I've heard and listened to other people speaking to the issue, suggesting that it's impossible after the next 3 years. I've also read scripts or some news items suggesting that the cedi has not really made any real gain over the last 1 week, contrary to what people expected before the tranche came. So you saw that it was actually appreciating. And then the money has dropped. And when people expected that to go down further, it is gradually coming up, and that could spell doom. Have you observed this?
Oh, it is not even really about spelling doom. The cedi was on, okay, it was being stabilized just because we're not paying our debts. So all the monies that were supposed to pay our debts, like the hard currencies, are being kept. In addition to that, the expectation, currency drives on expectations as well. So the expectation that the IMF has agreed to give us money and so and so and so has also helped in stabilizing the cedi. Expectation can help the cedi to depreciate. It can also help it to appreciate.
Now, yeah. We will do the extended version of this conversation because of time. But if you were going to speak to Ghanaians generally, from where you sit as somebody with some appreciation of economic policies and the finance sector of our economy, what would you tell any typical businessman or somebody in industry or somebody sitting on the fence waiting to see what will go on? Your camera is there.
Given the condition, we have to build this country, in fact. So we have to understand that we are at a point that we all have to contribute one way or the other in order to help this country to stand on its feet. Because if Ghana is not there, where are we going? So as for the hardship, it's going to increase. But what are you have to do to make sure that you keep yourself afloat, like stabilizing yourself? The country is trying to stabilize itself. So you must also start putting yourself in that mood of stabilizing yourself, especially if you do not belong to the high echelon in the society where you have enough resources to support yourself. But the average person, if you have been spending money on, okay, just look at your budget and make sure you adjust it so you can live in a way that it will be within your income, because you are going to pay more taxes. Prices will go up as is been in the past. Businesses, cost of doing business is going to go up. and employee compensation, you may have to increase it. So like doing business generally is also going to be more expensive. So we have to go through this just for a moment. A year or two, we should be able to stabilize and start building up again. It's normal, just that this has come at a time where we could have done better to help ourselves. Because COVID was not the problem that we are having. COVID is like a common denominator when it comes to all economies, including our neighbors, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Nigeria, and the rest. But they are not going through the kind of economic condition we are going through. So given the situation, let's just refocus and help ourselves, help our businesses, and we hope that over time, it can only get better.
Well, Kwashi Jokoto is my guest this evening. He's an economic policy and financial analyst. We didn't have much time to do this conversation because we spent some of the time speaking to Daniel Domelevo, who has been vindicated by the Supreme Court, which says that the decision by the president and his team to kick him out of office was unconstitutional. The same court says that the appointment of an acting Auditor General is also unconstitutional. What that means to the acting Auditor General, whether it's confirmed or otherwise, is also another issue we shall talk about. Because we did this conversation for the benefit of the masses who want to appreciate the IMF, the bailout, the conditionalities, what it means for businesses, expectations in the media budget, and the way forward. And I'm sure that your summary, which calls for an all-hands-on-deck approach, is appropriate. I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Eric.
God bless you.
Thank you,
we'll do
viewers.
this again.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This program will be repeated tomorrow at 1, and so you can join us and just enjoy what you can take away. Bye.